Well, good morning, all, and I would like to call this meeting to order and welcome all in attendance this morning, to all members of council that are joining us in person and virtually, to our staff who will provide us facts and information so we can make decisions in the best interest of the Corporation of ACW and our residents, to all members of the public that are in attendance this morning, and to the media that are joining us. I would like to indicate that meetings of council are live streamed on the Township's official website in accordance with the live streaming and virtual participation of meetings policy. By attending this meeting, attendees and participants are consenting to their image, voice, and comments being recorded and available for public viewing on the Township's website. The first thing I would like to do this morning, and it is an absolute privilege, to welcome Kelly Thompson to the ACW team. Kelly was born and raised in ACW, and we look forward to your positive contribution. Kelly, we have a great culture here in ACW that you will only add to, so welcome. Do any members of council have a pecuniary interest or potential conflict of interest to indicate at this time of any agenda item that we have? I thank you for that. We do have the minutes of the 16th day of January for approval, and I would entertain a mover and a seconder for these minutes, please. Deputy Mayor Van Stone moves. Councillor Miltenberg seconds that Ashfield-Colborne Township Council hereby adopts the January 16th, 2024 council meeting minutes as written. Do we have any questions on these minutes? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion? And that is carried. I thank you. Open forum is an opportunity for any members of the public to make any comments that they would care to at this time regarding any agenda items from number 5 on. Is there anyone that would like to make any comments at this time? I see none. Moving on to delegation, it is a privilege to welcome Dave Pullen, who is the Huron County Forestry Officer, to present to us today on the Forestry Conservation Update. Welcome, Dave.
Good morning, Mayor McNeil. And good morning to council and to everyone in attendance today. It's a pleasure to come up here on a beautiful day like this.
Before we get going, Dave, can we just double check that your computer is muted? And your Zoom, let's see, your Zoom is muted as well.
Yes.
There we go. That works better.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
Lawrence. So it's a pleasure to be up here today. I'll just get set up. It's the first time I've done this on this format, so bear with me while I get set up, and I will be with you in 1 second here. Okay. Okay, I think we're good to go. So, yeah, what a beautiful day to come up here. And I was thinking a lot about the history of the landscape on my way up here. And I'm going to show you a few pictures of that today from here in ACW. And I wanted to just let you know a little bit about myself. I haven't talked to your council since the last election. So there's a few new faces that I'm getting to know, and that's really great. My background is in agriculture and forestry, and I've done some work right across southwestern Ontario, but about a little more than 13 years ago now, I had the opportunity to come back to my roots here in Huron, and it's been a pleasure to be back, and I really enjoy the work, and I would just want to give you a little snapshot of what I do. And one of the best parts about this job is that every day is different, and there's also quite a bit of time out in the natural environment and on the agricultural landscape, which I enjoy. So we've got 14 community-owned or county-owned forests here in the county. We have, I look after those, oversee the management in those. We protect our existing woodlands and help people with management concerns, and I do extension and outreach with not only woodland owners, but also with groups who are involved in woodlands, like the Huron Perth Woodlot Association. And I also do weed inspection. I'm technically the weed inspector for the county, and I enjoy that work. Sometimes we get involved in some really interesting situations, like in the bottom right there, where one of your local former weed control providers is helping me with a fairly major hogweed infestation, which fortunately are not very common, but we do have the odd one that we're working on. I wanted to take you way back in time here, and you'll notice I have the C in ACW underlined. Thanks to the book Colborne Connections, we have some incredible photographs from way back when. And the one on the left is one of the earliest known photographs, I believe, in the township. And that is out near Shepparton, and that's a pioneer crew doing some logging and squaring up some timbers out there. And you can only imagine what that must have been like. The work involved and that determination and grit of those early pioneers. And, you know, we often think of them coming into this vast dark forest, which they did. But I also want to acknowledge a lot of the indigenous agriculture that happened many, many years, in fact, a couple of centuries and more before the early settlers showed up. And because of the European contact and the diseases and the loss of indigenous populations, there was a period of about 200 years that they refer to as the rewilding period, where a lot of the indigenous agricultural areas filled in again with trees, and that was common across the landscape. And there's a wonderful new book called The Once and Future Great Lakes Country that really, if you are interested in the history of landscaping, of the landscape, it really explains that. Picture on the right is now what we know as the Treble Woodlot down near Ben Miller, which has had a lot of history in it over the years, including Hugh Hill's sawmill, and you see some giant elm logs there. And those were going to make coffins in Goderich. That's what the use of those particular logs was. And that woodlot, you may know, was completely wiped out by the 2011 tornado. And it's making an incredible comeback, partly due to natural regeneration and partly due to the introduction of a number of tree species that we were able to assist with in planting through some of the funds that were raised after the tornado. That early land clearing, you know, we didn't have land use planning then, and there were a lot of problems across southwestern Ontario and southern Ontario. And you can see those photos showing catastrophic loss of topsoil, gullies, flooding. And that story of how that all evolved is told very well in a book called 2 Billion Trees and Counting, which I've been known to promote as being a good history of how we came to have some of the protections on woodlands that we have today. And it's also a biography of Edmund Zavitz, who was regarded as the father of forestry or modern day forestry in Ontario. And these are some of the things that came together as part of those problems, and they all sort of happened at once. And it's really important to understand the interaction between these things. And the bylaws that you see here in green are the bylaws that we still have today that were brought in the 1940s to protect what was left of the woodlands, and also to protect the efforts to reforest in some of the more marginal areas where we were having a lot of these erosion and water quality problems. Conservation authorities were brought in to protect the water and to do it on a watershed basis. And prior to that, there was a great effort to plant trees, and 2 billion trees, as in the title of the book, were planted across southern Ontario. And you can see some red lettering on there, and I'm going to show you a couple of pictures next of early reforestation in ACW, in particular in former Colborne. But what I want to say before I flip to the next one here is ACW in general was ahead of the curve on a lot of these reforestation efforts. And not only were there a lot of community forests developed through the Conservation Authority, but there were a tremendous number of private land reforestations that happened all the way from the early 1920s right up until the early 90s. And you can see quite a crash on the chart there when the M&R programs were cut back in the early 90s. And this was a very hopeful projection back in 2007 that we were going to spike back up. But I want you to take note of that flat red line. And that's where we've plateaued in Ontario, in southern Ontario, in terms of reforestation, is somewhere between 2 and 3 million trees a year, which quite honestly is not probably keeping up to the edgings and the small bits of woodlands that we're losing due to not only natural pressures, but also development and all that sort of thing. So this, I also wanted to say, is a great time to be planting trees because there's quite a bit of funding out there available for tree planting, including through our own Huron Clean Water project, which we're all very proud of. So this is some early reforestation effort in ACW, and I thought you would be interested in this. The one on the left is probably about the first reforestation in the whole county, and that's William Hill Sr., who I believe may have been John Hazlitt's great-grandfather. And Mayor McNeil is confirming that, so that must be right. And he knows the history better than I. And then in the middle at the top there, you see Mr. Charles Robertson overlooking what we now know as the Robertson Tract at the end of Pinery Line. And you can see from this photo, and if you go down there today, it's mind-blowing, the change on the landscape there. And that was a great example of fragile land, as was the one that Mr. Hill has seen overlooking on Highway 21 there. Those were very fragile pieces of land that had been cleared off, and a lot of those problems that I showed you earlier were happening on those sites. And then below that, you see the Shepparton Tract, which is our largest and oldest. Oh, sorry, the Robertson Tract is the oldest county forest. The Shepparton Tract is the largest on Highway 21. And you can see, you know, we often think of planting trees as being a multi-generational effort, and it almost always is. But there's my friend, the late Joe Freeman, on the right there, and this picture proving that you can actually grow a forest in a lifetime, because Joe was about 5 years old when these trees were planted. And that's a pretty incredible photo, I think. And I was so lucky to get out there with Joe about the year before he passed, just after we'd finished doing a selective harvest there. I want to spend a few minutes on this slide, a couple of minutes anyway. We talk a lot about the natural or the built infrastructure. We don't talk as much about the natural infrastructure and how all the ecological goods and services that it provides. And this is your great township here, and it's really a credit to a lot of the work that's been done by many generations to restore this natural infrastructure across the landscape. And obviously you have variations in it. Former Ashfield certainly having a lower tree cover than West Wawanosh, which actually West Wawanosh is very close to the recommended forest cover to protect human health and all the ecological benefits that forest cover provides, which is somewhere around that 30%. Ashfield, obviously, it's topography. Wherever it's flatter, there was more land clearing. That was just natural. There weren't as many erosion problems, although we know about that lake wind and some of the wind erosion challenges that we have there still to this day. And lots of work to be done there, and lots of opportunity for windbreaks still in places like former Ashfield. So, you know, that natural infrastructure, it protects the built infrastructure, and we really don't think a lot about the value of that. But as we get into, we're sort of returning to these times when that resiliency on the landscape is so important with some of the heavier rain events that we're getting, storm events. And as was the original intent of a lot of this reforestation effort, protecting those valuable agricultural soils is just key with this natural infrastructure. We've got a lot of challenges in forest conservation right now. Obviously, a lot of natural pressures like emerald ash borer, tree diseases that we're always keeping an eye out for, and also invasive plants. And we're trying to deal with a lot of that stuff. And there is funding available for people who are having trouble in their woodlots with losing ash and other challenges. There's also funding available through the Huron Clean Water Project for people to use independent foresters to get a really good handle on the value of their woodlands and looking forward to long-term management plans. There's also a tremendous amount of economic pressure on our woodlands, and certainly we see that in the urban areas with development. We don't have that so much here, but I wanted to show you this land value report from 2022, and I want to give credit to the Velco real estate appraisal group in London. And if you really want to cut to the chase on land values and really get a handle on what's happening, the Velco Land Values Report is kind of the go-to document. It covers all of southwestern Ontario. It breaks it down by county and even divides counties, I believe, by north and south. But this is an aggregated high and low valuation for our county. And you can see even in 21, 22, I believe they were talking somewhere around another 50% increase in the median sale value. And that's putting a lot of pressure on a lot of things that lots of, as you all know, lots more consolidation happening of ownership. But it's also, it puts a lot of pressure on our natural features. And I think it really highlights the need for conservation of our natural features. So how do we protect some of our natural features in ACW and here in the county? As I mentioned, back in the 40s, we brought in forest conservation bylaws, and all those protections, I think we have to remember, were brought in by that generation who remembered some of the challenges that we had in the early to mid 1900s with too much deforestation. And those people who were doing that early reforestation as well really had lived some of those problems and were extremely dedicated to reversing things. Then in 2016, ACW worked together with the county, and we assisted with the shoreline tree preservation bylaw, and I'm pleased to be able to assist the township with that. And that leads to quite a few lakeshore calls, and I think it's been very effective, just sort of getting the word out along the lakeshore that, you know, that wide open view of the water, if you're going to put the bluff at risk by clear cutting the bluff, it's not a good idea, not even for your own backyard, let alone for the neighbors. And of course, we have all these natural pressures on our shoreline right now. And, you know, as far as enforcement activity, there has been some over the last few years, but I would say the effort has, like our county bylaw, has been much more education and outreach and just working proactively with people to make sure that we're not putting the landscape at risk and make sure we're selectively managing trees instead of clear cutting them. And then land use planning, and I work out of the planning department, and having zoning bylaws to protect both agricultural and natural environment lands. And I think it's important to remember that the foundation of a lot of our land use planning here in this county is all around the protection of agriculture. And I think that it's important to remember that natural infrastructure where the natural environment areas are actually protecting those more and more valuable agricultural soils and protecting our food production. And then a lot of times I think when I'm on the landscape and I'm working with people who maybe, aren't necessarily happy about some of the things around forest conservation, and that I run into that a little bit. Sometimes I hear people sort of talk like if the natural environment is just kind of a dead zone that you can't do anything with it. Well, you folks here in ACW are a fantastic example of all the economic benefits and the economic development. Not only that, but all the health benefits that we get from these natural environment areas. And certainly your thriving maple operations up here, the timber industry and the forest conservation bylaw promotes harvest and good management, and wise marketing of our resources from those woodlands. And then there's a whole host of value-added opportunities and people coming here to hike and do other passive activities in the woods. There's also a growing body of research, and a lot of it right now is coming out of Cornell University in New York State. But that Farming the Woods book is talking about growing native plants and things that can produce value under tree canopy, and really utilizing those natural environment areas to do more value-added product and marketing and production. And I always like this this graph. We have to update it for the 2021 census figures that are now available, but you can see that we're here in Huron County, we're outproducing each of the individual maritime provinces, and that's pretty incredible. And it shows you the value of our land, the quality of our land. It shows you the skill of our farm community and our farm operators. And I think it also demonstrates, we're increasing our agricultural productivity while we're conserving our natural environment. Our overall natural cover in the county is somewhere in the 15 to 16% range, woodland cover. And we've been maintaining that for decades. And that's a lot different than some of the other areas where there are no protections. And we're demonstrating here that, yes, agriculture is our number one industry, and we are increasing our productivity while protecting those environmental features. And just in closing, I'd really like to credit Bonnie Sitter for this photography, which beautifully shows the interaction of the lake, the woodlands, and the farmland. And I wanted to leave you with this quote from back in 2005 by the Ontario College of Family Physicians. And I won't read it, but you can read it there. And my contact information is there. And I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you might have around any of this stuff or any specific concerns you have. And I really appreciate the opportunity to come up and speak with you.
Thank you very much, Dave, for a very tremendously informative presentation on the importance of woodlots. Does council have any questions of Dave? And I'm going to go first to Deputy Mayor Vanstone, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, Dave, I've got 3 questions, and these have all been asked to me, so I'm hoping that you can answer them.
Okay.
Hogweed, what and how can they get rid of it? Because I've had people that have had it, and there's no real good sprays that I know of to get rid of it, and digging it out is kind of dangerous. Then also, we have a tree program, which in ACW, which has gone over really well. But a lot of people have also asked me, all right, with all the disease going on in the trees right now, we have the ash going, the maple have got some kind of disease going on now, even some pines. There are different pines that are getting disease. What would be the best trees to plant for longevity? And then, I'm sorry, I hope you can remember all this.
I'm going to try.
The gravel pits. As you know, in ACW, we've had a lot of trouble with gravel pits, okay? And the biggest problem I see with the gravel pits is that they're not being rehabilitated. And they would make a perfect spot for trees or something like that. Is there anything or any way that the County of Huron could get a program going to encourage these people to who rehabilitate these pits with maybe trees, something like that, because they need something just to encourage them to do that. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mayor McNeil, through you to Councillor Vanstone. I'll try to answer those in sequence. Remind me what your first one was, and then I think I'll be good. Hogweed. Hogweed, we don't have too many serious incidents of hogweed. It's often found along water courses. We did have a very serious incident in the neighboring township, which we're pretty well got that cleaned up. It is specialized. A lot of people spray hogweed with Roundup or glyphosate and maybe mix it with different things at times. But there is a new herbicide which actually takes it out selectively. And I can provide more information later on that. But it is one that's used on the road allowances now. The great thing about it is that you leave the grass competition. And that's key for long-term control, because if you burn everything off, you have a seed bank there usually, and it just creates a bare area for more hogweed. The other thing I'd like to say about hogweed is there's a look-alike that we find all along the Maitland River. It's called purple angelica. It's actually a beneficial native plant, and to the untrained eye from 20 feet away or even up close, it's often mistaken, and people often go out and try to control it, whereas it's probably something that we should be trying to promote. Grows in the same habitats. And I would say most of the calls I get on hogweed are actually for the look-alike. So that's something I think we need to do more education and outreach on. Your second question around reforestation and diseases in trees, tree planting opportunities. Can you just ask me that one again?
Okay, thank you. Yes, there's so many trees now with diseases, and a lot of people want to plant something that is going to be alive after so many years. So
Yes.
what would you suggest as tree planting for that?
Yeah, so the first thing I always suggest to people is, unless it's someone like Paul Bollinger over here, who's a European trained forester who really knows his stuff, I often say to people, getting a good forester is money well spent, and getting some good advice on your specific woodlot, not only in terms of harvest capability, future productivity, but also in terms of the questions that you're asking, Councillor Vanstone. And generally speaking, what we're trying to do is bring species from a little further south. It's something we call assisted migration, and bringing species from down in the Carolinian zone that tend to have a better future with the way our winters seem to be warming. And this is certainly a great example of a winter that's warming. And so I could spend an hour answering that question, and I won't do that, but hiring a good forester is always a good step. And it's also a good way to manage some of those tree diseases that we're having to deal with, and to selectively take out some of the trees that should be coming out. And your third question about gravel pits, I agree. They're excellent areas for restoration. And with modern day aggregate licensing, there is a requirement for some sort of restoration and hanging on to the topsoil. Some people have old gravel pits pre-aggregate licensing. Some of those are eligible for a program called MAP, the Management of Abandoned Aggregate Pits. And that is a program that's very helpful to some people that have old abandoned pits. And there have been a number of restorations done in the county with that. And but I agree, there's a lot of opportunity in that industry for restoration and reforestation.
A follow-up, please?
Yeah, and may I have people call you to get that information on that map?
Yes,
program?
I can redirect people to the right sources of information. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you. Any additional comments of council? Yeah, Wayne, please.
Thanks, Glenn. I just have a quick question. I happened to be on the list roll one day, and right across from DJ's Furniture, I don't know how big the area was, but he clear cut that and drained it. How come that was allowed to happen?
I don't want to talk about any specific sites, although I can tell you I'm aware of that site. And that there are a number of examples of small 98 to 100% ash stands that are coming out these days. That's one of our great challenges that I mentioned with forest conservation right now, is that there are some of those smaller areas that were regrowing. They might have been clear cut in recent history. And ash is a pioneer species, so it tends to be one of the first things to come in. And sometimes you get close to 100% stand of ash. And so we are seeing a bit of that. Usually where we have trees now is on land that is not very productive. And a lot of people are looking at reforestation options. And a lot of the people, even the ones who have done those small clear cuts, are finding more appropriate areas and rejigging that forest cover, the location of the forest cover a little bit. So I am working with a lot of people who are having those challenges right now. It's always good, though, if I may, Mayor McNeil, it's always good if I can take a look first and see what's there before it's up in a pile, or worse, up in a pile and on fire, because it's a lot better for everyone.
Yeah,
way.
that grew up in trees for a reason, because 90% of the time you probably can't work it anyways. But maybe with today's modern drainage, you can. So
Yeah,
okay.
and there's a lot to that,
Yeah.
whether drainage is an option, or also whether it has a wetland designation, and that's definitely a good idea for anyone who has something like that to get in touch with the Conservation Authority as well.
So what is the minimum size that you can clear cut without? Is it like a half an acre?
Yes, each of the townships has or local municipalities has a woodlot bylaw that protects woodlots from half an acre to 2.5 acres or 1 hectare, and the county bylaw protects everything from 2.5 acres and up. And but those two bylaws work in tandem with one another. So essentially anything from half an acre and up has protection under the bylaws.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Dave, as you commented, shoreline tree preservation is very, very important to ACW because of our lake shore. And we really thank you for your assistance with that to protect our shoreline. You indicated that was it ACW has a 15 to 16% tree cover, or Huron County?
ACW has actually got a higher tree cover than on average, but there's quite a range from. I'm just going to throw it up here. So all of ACW is on the top line of that orange graph, and I qualify that these are approximate numbers. That I had our GIS people put these together very quickly, but you see that we've got about over 75% of all of ACW in agriculture, and close to 23% in natural environment, but then a range with Ashfield being about 14.8% natural environment cover. And to a high of West Wawanosh, they're at 32, and that's one of the highest forest covers in the county of any local municipality. And of course, that has a lot to do with the topography in West Wawanosh.
Perfect. Thank you for that. And we're very happy as a council, we approved the purchase of 500 trees for distribution to our residents. And because we know the importance of trees, and that quote really captures that. So David, thank you very much for your presentation to us today, not only for the information and the importance of forestry in Huron County and specifically in ACW. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we will now move on to item 6, which Treasury, and 6.1 is the 2023 year-end transfer to reserves. Do we have any questions on this prior to me asking for a motion? A question from Councillor Miltenberg, please.
Sorry, trying to unmute. I'm really excited to see this. I think it's a great idea. Every year at budget time, the reserves take a lot of my time just trying to figure it out just for my own comfort level. So, Ellen, great report here. And I am looking forward to the complete report that's being included in the budget. Thanks a lot.
With that enthusiasm, would you be so inclined to move this motion? And you would. Do we have a seconder for it? And that'd be Councillor Forrester, that Ashfield-Colborne-Wawanosh Township Council hereby agree to transfer the following amounts to reserves for the year ending December 31, 2023. The website meeting management software for $20,000, the asset management plan at $8,000, parks concept plan at $20,000, gravel pit farm license application zoning at $60,000, and the aggregate resources at $235,298. Questions, comments? All in favor of the motion? And that is carried. Thank you. We have nothing under planning today. We do have under the building department, the year-end building report under 8.1. It is for information purposes. Does council have any questions of Brett on this report? Great work. Thank you very much, Brett, for the great efforts. 8.2 is the community on-site septic inspection program. We've previously discussed this and agreed to it. Any questions or comments? And if not, I'll entertain a show of hands, and we'll adopt that in section 18 as bylaw. Opposed? And that is carried. Thank you very much. Under administration, the appointment of deputy clerk, as indicated at the outset, welcome to Kelly Thompson. We're really happy to have you on board. And I would entertain a show of hands, and we will adopt this in section 18 as a bylaw, the appointment. And that is supported by council. I thank you. The minimum staff compensation for work outside of regular hours. We have had this discussion in the past, and it is coming back to council. I would make a suggestion to council, and that is, I think that we should maybe look at the fairness of this. And when I say that, when we learn that we expect staff to come to night meetings and be compensated in some instances 50% as to what council is compensated, I don't know whether that's fair or right. And I'm asking for council's thought on making the staff remuneration equal to the council remuneration. That way, no one is disadvantaged. And I bring that up as a discussion point of council. Councillor Hickey, please.
I was going to, excuse me, I was going to comment on this actually. When council comes into, we'll say, a planning meeting, a council member will come in at 7 o'clock, could be out of here by 7:30 for our council rate. So we'll be here for 30 minutes for our council rate. Employees work somewhere or work here during the day. The employees could be back in here by 6 or quarter after to get ready for the night, get the video ready, get speakers ready, get our planner ready, and then they're here after also, staying later after we leave after that 7:30. So they could be here twice, 3 times as long as I am for a fraction of the price that anybody around this table is getting. So I agree that fair would be equal pay for what council, at the council rate. And I think this is an example of employee retention. It's talked about at Roma this past year, and it was talked about last year also. I forget what conference it was. Employee retention, stuff you do for your employees to keep them. And this is a small token, I think, but I think it's needed to, and I'm not saying any employee would quit over it, but I think it's a small gesture as appreciation for our employees for what they do before we get here for that meeting and after we go home. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for those comments. Any additional comments of council on this? Councillor Miltenberg, please.
Keep pushing the wrong button to unmute. I'm inclined to agree with Evan there. I did go to a Roma session on municipal staff retention. I have it written in notes when it comes appropriate. And I was very heartened to see that senior staff was in attendance. And it was talking about the difficulty of it all, retaining and what you can negotiate when you're moving, or, you know, when people are hiring. I don't think that the current rate that's in the staff report is appropriate. I'm hesitant to use the wording of let's do what the counselors do because we were here and there. And you know, if we want to use that rate, fine. I'm fine with the rate, but I think it's comparing apples to oranges. I think for ease, we could use that rate. The other thing you could do is say time and a half from the moment they walk in the building to the time they leave, minimum 2 hours. And I think that rate's going to come very similar to a counselor rate. So at any rate, yeah, I would suggest that I would support something along what Evan said for the exact same reasons he stated. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. The additional comments, I guess, Councillor Snowblin, please.
I don't want it to be said that I don't appreciate the staff and their hard work and so on, especially coming in after hours at a meeting. But I believe I'd have to respectfully disagree with Councillor Hickey. I think you're comparing apples to oranges, as Councillor Miltenberg suggested. To compensate what the councillors are being compensated for the reasons that he outlined, I believe are somewhat conflicting. I do feel that it's fair to a minimum of 2 hours, or as Councillor Miltenberg suggests, a time and a half policy with a minimum of 2 hours. I could live with that. I just think that we have to be careful of, you know, how we approach this and where it leads to at some point down the road. Staff are, I'll be the first to admit, staff are very much appreciated. I think they do go above and beyond their duties often, and showing them appreciation can be demonstrated in other ways. But I can't endorse the same compensation as a council member. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So I don't think we need to belabor this. We just need to you know, have a discussion and move on. Councillor Hickey, like, what do you want to suggest? And then I'll ask for a show of hands for the same compensation for staff as what councillors receive and see where that goes, or what would the pleasure of council be? Clerk, do you have a comment to make? Please.
I was just going to suggest that if you're looking to change it from what it is, I would request that that council direct staff to amend what's proposed and bring it back to the next meeting for formal consideration. So that way you have the final wording in front of you. However, we will need to have that direction to do that.
And would you like that direction in the form of a motion, or just a
I don't
sentiment?
I think it's sentiment from council, if they're in agreement, if, you know, by a show of hands, if in agreement.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Miltenberg, please.
Yeah, I'd like to make the suggestion that we change it to time and a half, minimum of 2 hours from the time they set foot in the building and to the time they leave.
You prefer that to the same as councillor remuneration?
Yeah, I think it's going to be really close, but it does differentiate. And I think it recognizes the extra trip and mileage, of course. I'm more comfortable with that wording than the councillor remuneration, because I don't think it's the end cost might be very similar, but the wording is what troubles me. Thank you.
Great. Fair enough. Councillor Hickey, what are your thoughts, please?
I would stick to the council pay for the staff members that show up for those meetings.
Okay, Deputy Mayor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like us to look at this because as of it right now, and the staff can correct me on this, that if they come in, they can take that time off in lieu. So as Councillor Hickey said, so if Mark's here from, or Florence, anybody, I'm just picking names. I'm sorry, I'm not picking anybody in particular. But so if you come in at 6 for us to have our meeting at 7, and then you're here till say 8, and then you have to lock everything up at 9, that's 4 hours of lieu time. Where this way, you're only getting 2 hours of paid time. So I don't know. I think we should look at that too. And maybe staff don't want that. I don't know, but it sounds to me like it would be a better deal. So thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. CAO, please.
Just for clarification, this is minimum. So if it was a 3-hour meeting or a 4-hour meeting, it would be those hours. This is the minimum. So if the meeting is less than 2 hours, so the policy that's ahead of you right now is the minimum. So if it goes over 2 hours, it's whatever their hourly rate is. With regards to banking time, yes, staff, so I'm going to use an example. If staff are here for a 4-hour meeting in the evening, they would put 4 hours on their timesheet, and they have that option if they want to bank that time and take that off in lieu. That option is already in place.
Yes.
So this is just to clarify the minimum amount of time. So if a meeting was a half an hour, they're getting a minimum, and the way the policy reads today is 2 hours minimum at their hourly rate. But if they go over that, they're paid whatever their hourly rate is. If it was a 3-hour, 4, 5, 6-hour meeting.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Snowblin, a comment, please.
Well, I think back in the day when I worked, on an hourly rate, I think the industry standard was time and a half for overtime. And I don't know if it's changed any. I guess I haven't been in the workforce enough to know that for sure. But I think it'd be safe to say that I have family that work in, different manufacturing plants, and that's the industry standard. I don't know that we should be, if you think it's fair to compare it to an industry standard or not, but I just want to make certain that council isn't making a decision that's going to put us on a slippery slope somewhere down in the future. So I could live with a minimum of 2-hour compensation at time and a half, and every hour past that, time and a half for the hours that they are working.
Okay, thank you for that. CAO, please.
Yeah, just to clarify Anita's comment, yes, employment standard states 44 hours a week is anything over 44 hours for any employee is at time and a half.
Okay, I'm kind of sensing that the sentiment is time and a half, so I'm going to ask for a show of hands if council is in support of staff bringing back a report on meetings outside of the regular meetings, time and a half. Deputy Mayor, a follow up, please.
I just want to clarify, then, so this, again, Mark says the regulation is 44 hours. So does this override that, or do you have to wait for the 44 hours to get your overtime?
Okay, thank you for the question. CAO, please.
This would be a specific policy for our municipality, and it would be stated as such. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to ask for a show of hands if we're in support of staff bringing back a report to a future meeting at time and a half for compensation to our staff for meetings outside of the regular hours. If council is in support of this. Show of hands, please. And opposed? And that is carried. Thank you very much. We're good in the direction to staff?
Yes, so that policy will be brought back, amended to reflect that, and then council can formally consider it then at that time.
Correct. Thank you. And thanks everyone for the discussion on this. 9.3 is the reconsideration of planning meetings. It was asked at a previous meeting that this be brought forward under new business, and we are doing that. And if we want to reconsider this, the first thing we have to do is to have a motion by someone, a motion for reconsideration of the planning meetings being held at night. Then we will have the discussion, and that motion would be made by someone that voted in favor of this. Clerk, please.
To clarify, a motion to reconsider does need to carry by a 2/3 majority. Okay.
So do we have a motion made by Councillor Forrester for reconsideration?
That's, you would have, well, actually, it's just the mover. That's
And
So just to clarify, Councillor Forrester moved it. A seconder does not necessarily have to be within the majority. The seconder just agrees that it needs to be put on the floor.
do we have a seconder for this? And that is seconded by Deputy Mayor. All in favor of the motion, and it must pass by 2/3 for reconsideration. So the motion is asked to be reread, and then Deputy Mayor had a comment, please.
That Ashfield-Colborne-Wawanosh Township Council hereby reconsider the schedule of planning meetings. Just to clarify, this vote does not, we cannot have a discussion on it. You can, we can't discuss it. Wayne would have he would have the ability to explain why he would like it presented. However, a discussion does not happen on it. It goes straight to a vote.
Okay,
You don't need to.
you don't need to. Okay,
Okay, so the reason I did this, like, usually they're only 10, 15 minutes and it takes longer than that for me to get here, so I think they should move into a regular council meeting and. Okay,
perfect. Okay, all in favor of the reconsideration of this? Opposed? It is defeated. It needed a 2/3 majority. Okay, thank you very much. Under 10, the Water Department, Veolia, that the report is for information purposes. Do we have any questions on this? And if not, number 11 is a drainage report on the Wilds Municipal Drain. Any questions? And if not, I'll ask for a show of hands if we're in support of this, and we'll adopt this in section 18 as a bylaw. And that is supported by council. I thank you. Under Public Works, we have the report, and Tom is here to respond to any questions that council may have of this report. Do we have any questions of Tom? Not? Great. No, Wayne, Councillor? Okay, perfect. Thank you. 12.2 is the bridge weight restrictions schedule. Do we have any questions or comments on this? We're seeing it's being amended. Councillor Forrester, please.
okay, thanks, Glenn. So that River Mill Line Bridge is closed? I thought so you can still walk across it, or?
Yeah, it's just it was just the standard they used in the load limit column, so I could have written 0. It's still open for walking.
Pedestrian,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Good for that. Okay. Any other questions? And if not, I'll ask for a show of hands, and we'll adopt that in section 18 as a bylaw. That is opposed, and that is supported by council. Thank you. The equipment operator laborer appointment, and we will adopt that in section 18 as a bylaw of Josh Ackert. And I would ask for a show of hands if we're in support of this, and we'll adopt that in section 18. And that is supported by council. I thank you. The gravel tender for 2024, I would entertain a mover and a seconder to receive and accept this tender. Deputy Mayor moves. Councillor Hickey seconds at Ashfield-Colborne-Wawanosh Township Council. Accept the tender received from Johnson Brothers Bothwell Limited and authorize pre-budget approval in the amount of $443,683.20, including HST, for the 2024 maintenance gravel. All in favor of this motion? And that is carried. Thank you. Calcium tender for 2024, a mover and a seconder for this, please. Councillor Blake moves, Councillor Hickey seconds at Ashfield-Colborne-Wawanosh Township Council. Accept the lowest bid received by Daily Dust Control Limited and authorize pre-budget approval in the amount of $248,016.50, including HST, to supply and apply approximately 475 tons of liquid calcium chloride for 2024. All in favor of the motion? And that is carried. I thank you. Committee reports. Do any members of council have any committee reports that they would like to share at this time? Councillor Snowball will be the first one, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I didn't attend the launch that was held at the Libro Center in Clinton for the community safety and well-being. I was out of town at that particular day, but I understand that it was well received by the press and there was a great article on that Michaela Johnson from the town of Goderich shared with us, and I think it was well received. There will be another launch that will go for the next priority, but for now we are working on the mental health and well-being and tying it in with the Bell Let's Talk theme. And there were some I don't know what you call them, I guess somebody from here from South Huron shared some, they're not videos but graphics, I guess, that can be put on our websites, and there is enough for, I think, one a week to be put on our websites, and I was hoping that ACW would be part of that and share those. I also have the Goderich Fire Board, but if there's any questions on the community safety and well-being, I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions on that? Seeing none, please continue, Councillor Snow.
Yeah, Goderich Fire Board was January 26th, and we elected a new chair. The draft budget is what we had talked about, was in the range of $444,000. ACW's portion, according to the, I guess, the residents that the Goderich Fire Board serves, is approximately 30%, which is in the range of $262,000. Goderich's portion is 51% and Central Huron's is 18%. There was also talk on the salaries. There was some infrastructure upgrades, particularly with the building, that had to be talked about, and also in the training, recruiting 4 new hired volunteer firefighters, and a debt repayment of $110,000 that's going into the reserve fund. So after the budget, there'll be a reserve of $7,000. Not a lot of money, but I guess that will likely come, I think, Florence, to council at some point with that draft budget. I'm not sure how it comes. This would be the first year I've done the Goderich Fire Board, the budget.
Sorry, yeah, Goderich will forward it to us, yes.
It is forward to us.
No, they will forward.
They will at one point, and then we will approve it.
We'll include in our mass budget.
Oh, I see. Okay, good. Thank you. And so if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you very much, Councillor Snowblin. Any questions of Councillor Snowblin? Thank you very much for that. Any additional reports? Councillor Hickey, please.
I've got 4 of them, if that's okay to go. Please. On January the 16th, I attended the Lucknow Fall Fair annual general meeting on behalf of the mayor, and brought greetings from the township. The big thing out of the Fall Fair in Lucknow is 10 years ago, they had the people, but not the money. Now, 10 years later, they have the money, but not the people. They don't have the volunteers to put the event on. They're not sure in what capacity they're going to be in this coming fall. That was January the 16th. On February the 1st, they had an info night for people to come out to learn about what jobs are available or how they could help out. And then I've heard there's another follow-up to that meeting in May for volunteers if people are looking to help out the fair. January 21st to 23rd, I was at Roma. A couple of the sessions I sat in on was exploring solutions to increased housing in rural contexts. And CMHC has financial incentives for social housing projects in all across Ontario. Interest loans, details to help to build the social housing in communities. CMHC is trying to help that. Economic development in local communities. The big one about this was economic development does not have to be to bring in a new company into your area. Economic development, it can be a community economic development. There could be a small business and another small business that could help each other in the sales, in the distribution, in the purchasing. So the idea out of that was economic development to connect the small ones together to help them grow together individually. Another part of that, of the economic development, was the municipal accommodation tax, which I think it was Thunder Bay that put that in, and they put that towards tourism sites and activities in their region from that municipal tax, accommodation tax. And the big thing out of the whole thing was share your story. Economic development doesn't matter if you're, for that a scenario, the accommodation tax, You tell people how you're spending it. You show people how you're doing it. If you're helping small companies find each other to help each other, you tell people about it. Share your story in the economic development. I sat in on Drainage Act, isotope growth with isotopes. On the last day was a breakfast, the profound demographic shift that's underway in local solutions. And the best part I came out of this one was someone I met, I believe, with Bill back at AMO was, and I'm going to slaughter this, Lalitha Flash, and she's the COO and the Assistant CEO of Elections Ontario. And I had a talk with her after a learning lunch that down at AMO, talking about, and they're putting together the master voting list. They're trying to get all the information from people. They're going through with Canada Post and other organizations to get information, to get a master list where everybody's on it. And I approached her at AMO to talk about the Amish community in our township and the lack of identification and information they have to get on the voters list. So I talked to her at that meeting. She just happened to be there at that breakfast. And she introduced me to Gene, I can't say his last name, Director of Register and Elections Ontario. And they have my contacts and they're going to reach out to me because I said there's communities in our area that would help you to find a list to help them. And they said, well, it's not just Amish. There's other ethnic groups in Toronto. There's other ethnic groups around the province that have this issue. So I look forward to working with them. January 24th, I had Maitland Valley Conservation. February 14th is our annual general meeting at 2 p.m. in Roxeter. Some of the speakers we have at that meeting coming up is Ted Briggs. He's the Great Lakes Advisor for the Minister of Environment, Conservation and Parks. He's going to have an overview of the Healthy Lake Huron. Rachel White from the County of Huron, and she's going to have an overview of the Huron Clean Water Project. Elena Dick, who's with the Township of Howick, she's going to have an overview of the Gorey Nature Trail. And Chris Snell and Amy Gangle from North Perth, and they're going to have overview of the plans of the Galbraith Conservation Area, which is property owned by Maitland Valley over in North Perth, I believe, Perth East, North Perth. And there's a lease program or a lease agreement coming up with North Perth to run projects on the property of the Maitland Valley. So that's the overview for that. And then last night, February 5th, we had the Dungannon Community Alliance meeting. Kelly was there with me for the first night. And we're just wrapping up ideas and purchases through the grant that expires, I believe, the end of March. That's coming up. And we look forward to displaying those efforts this summer. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that fulsome report. Is there any questions or comments of Evan? I'm going to Councillor Miltenberg, do you have a question or you're going to have a report? You're going to have a report. Okay. So you're next up. Thank you very much for that, Evan, on that fulsome comments on your involvement. Thank you for attending the Ag Society dinner on my behalf. Councillor Miltenberg, please.
Thank you. Two reports, one very short because it was the Lucknow Joint Rec meeting, which there will be minutes for, but I just wanted to congratulate the new chair, Wayne Forrester, who was appointed at the last meeting. I also attended the Roma conference. Evan and I tried to split up who went to what, so I didn't sit through, I don't think, any sessions with him, but I did see the mayor and senior staff in some that I was at, so I'm only going to report on a couple. One of them it was actually fairly brief, but for me, quite fascinating. It was AMO had a social and economic prosperity review. And I'm a big fan of AMO. That's the conference I go to every year. And this year it's in Ottawa. They often have very interesting presentations, and this was one of them. And what they were talking about was the pressure on the municipalities, tax-wise, in particular in relationship with the province. In 2021, Ontario had the second highest property taxes in Canada. And inflation is going up, but because 100% of our revenue is tied to property taxes, our revenue does not go up with the inflation. So at this point, there are $64 billion spent throughout the province, and 1/3 of them, and it's in housing, health, social services, and that's not even including things like how local communities buy their own CAT scans. 1/3 of that is actually paid by the municipality, where in other provinces it's paid by the province. So the tax load on Ontario municipal taxpayers is much larger and getting larger thanks to inflation, and we don't really have any ways to combat it. So they had 4 suggestions, and one was pass a council resolution. Second was meet with your media and talk about it. 3 was write to your MPPs, and 4th was ensure that the community is aware that some of these pressures that is increasing their taxes is not actually anything when we can control. And I'm not actually at this point asking us to do any of those things, because there were some very engaged people in that room, and I feel like other councils are going to be circulating resolutions that we could add our names to, like why create extra work for staff when we're already in the process of switching some positions out and slightly short-staffed at budget time. Anyway, I thought it'd be a good thing for council to be aware of. I expect a very fulsome discussion on this later in the year at this next conference. And I also think that our new deputy clerk / communications, whatever the actual title is, this is a good subject to be aware of, because it's certainly with 2024 taxes, as far as I'm aware, I didn't catch up in the last 2 weeks, but impact is still way behind where current assessments are. There is a big fall coming, and it's not really of our municipal making. So I really thought that was interesting. Another presentation, which was on the last day. Now, I did check this morning, and some of the Roma presentations are up online. This one is not, and I'm not sure if it's going to be. It's called Impact of Polarization on Public Decision Making. And I actually have been following that topic for a few years now. I bought a few books reading about it. It is a hot topic in conflict resolution. We have some very divergent views, and how do we get people to the middle, to something that works not well possibly for everyone, but something that everyone can live with at least and feels heard. I am going to follow up, because I think that presentation was something would be really interesting for everybody on council. So before I give a report, I'm going to reach out to Roma and see if I can get some more hard copy on that. But I thought that was really good. And the last part of Roma, which I found very interesting, and again, this is my particular interest, is numbers. I was in the trade show, and I was talking to a firm who I will not name because I'm not here to plug somebody, but they worked with, I think, about, at this point, 25% of the municipalities, and to work with them on investments. And the examples that were given to me was, and I don't know if all of us have, but I have mentioned on council before that, we collect taxes for the school board and we tax them for the county, and we don't get paid for it. We collect all their money and then we send it to it. And sometimes we get yelled at for the high taxes when it's, over 2/3 of the taxes are somebody else's. But the point that they were making is a way to get paid for that, since we can't get paid for it, is to take that money and put it into a short-term investment, because we do get to hold the money until we have to pay them. And how to do that. And this person, I have their card, said they'd be happy to talk to staff or make a presentation. I have not reached back out to them, but it's certainly something that I'm interested in, at the very least, forwarding to staff, because I think with the interest rates being what they are compared to what they were 5 years ago, that there is opportunities to be made in short-term money. And I'm not an expert at it, but I like hearing about it. So anyway, that's what I thought was really interesting in the trade show. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Miltenberg, for that fulsome report. Any questions or comments of Councillor Miltenberg? And I also attended the Roma convention, and it was the largest convention they ever had to date. I believe 1,800 people were in attendance, and I attended as many workshops and speaking seminars that I could. I was involved with a number of delegations with both the county and Western Ontario Wardens Caucus. We actually had 10 delegations with different ministries and the opposition parties, and I would have to say that they were very well received. Something I would like to additionally comment on is that as chair of the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus, the annual meeting was held last Friday, actually, and I had invited the caucus to come to Ben Miller, to ACW and Huron County for this meeting, and it was and so it covers the wardens and the mayors from 15 counties, from Simcoe down through Wellington County to the Niagaras, to Essex, Kent, and up to Georgian Bay and right along the lake shore of Lake Huron. And Ben Miller were excellent hosts. The food was excellent. The accommodation, they were so obliging. I personally, Van and I personally hosted a hospitality room for all of the attendees of the wardens and mayors and the CAOs. And they were, it was a great venue. And I would suggest that there's a great amount of interest, because we live in such a beautiful area that we should never take for granted of conventions coming to Ben Miller from the city for a lot of reasons. One is the ease to get here as opposed to traveling there. And I just wanted to communicate how great a host that Ben Miller was, and it was great to be able to be there. So with that, any questions, comments? Oh, please, Wayne, please. I apologize.
All right, thanks, Glenn. As Jennifer said, I'm now the chair of the Lucknow Rec Board. It was just mainly budget. We discussed that. And then I think it was the following Thursday, I attended the Lucknow Community Health Center Board. It was just budget. It doesn't even cost us $500 to balance the budget there. So that's about all I have on that. Okay, any questions?
Any questions of Councillor Forrester? Not, thank you very much for that. And again, congratulations on being chair of the rec board. That's great.
Thank you.
Great job. Okay. We'll now move on to new business. Is there any new business that anyone would like placed on a future agenda? If not, I would like to bring something up, and that is, I believe all of council received an email from Spencer Prey on behalf of Enbridge requesting support for a letter to the Ontario Energy Board for natural gas. I believe it is prudent for us to do this in due diligence, because we get a lot of requests from residents within ACW for natural gas. And I would entertain a show of hands if we are in support of this topic being placed on a future agenda. That is supported by council. Okay, staff? Thank you for that. Thank you, council. Correspondence for direction under 15.1, the request from Steve Boyce to tap maple trees at Ben Miller. And that season is very, very close. Deputy Mayor Vanstone, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to have this sent to the Ben Miller Hall Board. Last year, or whenever we passed it the last time, I got some flack from them. They felt that they weren't included in this. So I think to keep everybody on good stead, I'd like to see it sent to them. And if they approve it, that's fine. We'll approve it here again. But I'd like to see them have some input. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Clerk, please, any comment on the process?
I would just suggest that if council, if they agree with that, I would suggest that you kind of give pre-approval, that you're approving it pending their endorsement. That way there is no lag in time. And if the season gets underway, then Mr. Boyce can proceed.
I would kind of concur with that, because maple syrup tapping is kind of imminent. Deputy Mayor, please.
And I've got no problem with that. I would move that motion that if the hall board is in favor, that we approve this, but if not, then it will be turned down. Thank you.
I'm worried about the timing, because I think the Ben Miller Hall Committee just had a meeting, and I don't think they have any plans to having another one till maybe could be April sometime. So is that going to be too late for this? So.
Deputy Mayor, any idea when the next meeting is?
I don't, but I know if it goes back to Gina, she does it by phone for something like this, so it could happen.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to go to Councillor Miltenberg, Snowblin, and Hickey in that order, please. You may be muted.
I am. I'm pushing the wrong button again. Thank you. Well, Mark said most of what I was going to say. I mean, maple season, Curtis will know better than me, but I'm pretty sure it's really, really close. And there'd be this is, okay. I understand the process of what it should do. This request should have come in sooner from whoever the man is. Ben Miller should have brought it forward before that. There was the question, I think, last year, what if somebody else wants to? I think we should approve it and then say, going forward, let's have a policy about this so that it doesn't come back again. Do you know what I mean? Because any delay could be a really big delay. And I know that the Ben Miller board, I'm not sure if they officially told us that or Bill just said it, but somebody thought they should have an opinion, and they should. But due process is somewhat mixed up right now, and I would hate for this, if the answer is going to be yes, and I would also hate for somebody who, and I'm not saying it would happen, but maybe it's a personal thing and they don't want this particular person doing it, but somebody else, or, you know, whatever. I think we need to say yes because of the timing, and that for 2025, something is in place much sooner than maple syrup season. That's my opinion.
Thank you very much for your comments. And just to your last comment, probably something at the end of 2024 for the intentions of 25. You got it. Councillor Snowblin and then Hickey, please.
I agree with everything Councillor Miltenberg said. I would be leery about having, in whether it's this circumstance or any circumstance, having a committee of council have veto powers over a council decision. I think that's going down another slippery slope. Council makes the final decisions on things, not committees.
Thank you for that. Councillor Hickey, please.
Yes, I agree with Councillor Snowblin. That's what I was going to come up with. If we agreed today, but pending the Hall Committee approval, that would make the committee overrule council. So I just look for clarification on that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Clerk, please.
No, you are right. And I think I agree that would be inappropriate during this conversation. I think that probably the right thing to do would be approve the request, and then notifying the Ben Miller Hall committee that this is happening so that they're made well aware of what's going on. And then we can maybe have a conversation about what happens in 2025.
I'm sorry, but I've lost sound. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Councillor Miltenberg. Can you hear us now or not?
Now I can.
Now you can. Okay, so I'm going to do this again. So I'm going to ask for a show of hands if we are in support of entertaining the request from Mr. Boyce for tapping the trees for 2024. A show of hands, please. And opposed? Yeah, okay, and that is carried. Thank you very much. And we will have a more appropriate process going forward for next year. Thank you. Under correspondence for information, we have a number of items. Is there anything that anyone would like to address? I would like to draw everyone's attention to the February 15th joint training webinar. It is very efficient when all 9 municipalities in the county are involved in these webinars, and they have been proven to be very, very successful, and I would suggest very efficient way of doing that, and I would draw everyone's attention to the 15th of February for that. Under 17.1, Councillor Miltenberg has indicated her desire to attend the AMO conference being held in Ottawa from the 18th to 21st of August. And with that, we'll go to the bylaws. And would I have the permission of council to go around the room with these bylaws? The first would be the bylaw 04-2024, the appointment of the Deputy Clerk Communications Coordinator, moved by Deputy Mayor Vanstone, seconded by Councillor Snowblin, that leave be given to introduce bylaw number 04-2024, being a bylaw to appoint the position of Deputy Clerk / Communications Coordinator for the Corporation of the Township of Ashfield-Colborne-Wawanosh, and that it now be read severally, a first, second, and third time, and finally passed the 6th day of February 2024. All in favor of the motion? And that is carried. Thank you. 18.2 is moved by Councillor Hickey, seconded by Councillor Miltenberg, that leave be given to introduce bylaw number 05/2024, being a bylaw to authorize the implementation of a community on-site septic inspection program in the Township of Ashfield-Colborne-Wawanosh, and that it now be read severally, a first, second, and third time, and finally passed the 6th day of February 2024. All in favor of the motion? And opposed? And that is carried. Thank you. 18.3 is moved by Councillor Forrester, seconded by Councillor Blake, that leave be given to introduce bylaw number 06-2024, being a bylaw to amend bylaw number 50-2023, being a bylaw to provide for the construction of a municipal drain to be known as the Wilds Municipal Drain, Branch A improvement of 2022 in the Township of Ashfield-Colborne-Wawanosh, and to provide for the levying of costs, and that it now be read severally, a first, second, and third time, and finally passed the 6th day of February 2024. All in favor of the motion? And that is carried. Thank you. 18.4 is moved by Councillor Forrester, seconded by Councillor Miltenberg, that leave be given to introduce bylaw number 07-2024, being a bylaw to appoint the position of equipment operator / laborer for the Township of Ashfield-Colborne-Wawanosh, and that it now be read severally, a first, second, and third time, and finally passed the 6th day of February 2024. All in favor of the motion? And that again is carried. And 18.5 is moved by Deputy Mayor Vanstone, seconded by Councillor Snoblin, that leave be given to introduce bylaw number 08-2024, being a bylaw to amend bylaw number 05-2013, being a bylaw to regulate the traffic and the placing, standing, stopping, or parking of an object or vehicle on highways and parking lots within the Township of Ashfield-Colborne-Wawanosh, and that it now be read severally, a first, second, and third time, and finally passed the 6th day of February 2024. All in favor of this motion? And that is carried. We do not have a closed session today or reporting out, and the confirmatory bylaw would be moved by Councillor Hickey, seconded by Councillor Snoblin, that leave be given to introduce bylaw number 09-2024, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Township of Ashfield-Colborne-Wawanosh Council meeting held on February 6, 2024, and that it now be read severally, a first, second, and third time, and finally passed the 6th day of February 2024. All in favor of the motion? And that again is carried. And finally, the adjournment will be made by Deputy Mayor Vanstone, seconded by Councillor Miltenberg, that Ashfield-Colborne-Wawanosh Township Council does now adjourn to meet again on the 15th day of February 2024 at 7 p.m. or at the call of the mayor. All in favor of this motion? And that is carried. Thank you very much to all members of council and to our staff and our presenters today. Thank you. Meeting is adjourned.